and done a lot of good work in addition to their own, creative output, the editing job and presence in the literary community. But sometimes we go into our own little places and do our thing, and we forget that there is a community out there, and they put a lot of labor, a lot of, good spirit into sustaining this, and sometimes that goes recognizing Savannah Bava, the publications, and Pico spoke, Kevin, but they got a lot of creative stuff inside themselves that actually inspired them to go into this business to begin with. And I like that, because we are in a community. And this loom book, lots of the loom, Massachusetts, and the cut, and we forget the connection between this and stuff. But the engagement with history is always very, very nice, and especially these years. And so we know where we're coming and where the nation is going or not going. And, it's funny how said in the collection that puts focus back on the white male where the distortion of vision begins, implication of the result. Not to call names, male, female, but as a matter of historical fact, certain things happen. On a descriptive level, that's what happened. And the distortion of vision, that creates a lot of problems for all of us. We've got to acknowledge that we can move forward. So this is a very, very strong book, engagement with history very good. And Gloria, she's done a lot of labor and good stuff in the editorship of the Savannah Bava Press, published a lot of good books. And she's soldier on, very dependable, not a whole lot of razzmatazz out there, but just keeps going. You know what you're getting. And, so the books that she has brought on the whiteness of home is here, and she'll be reading from that. And so I think we're in for a good evening. And, so Kevin, why don't you?
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming, some old friends, some new friends, and a lot of folks that I hope will become your friends. Thanks for coming here to help me celebrate my new book. It's great to be doing it with Gloria, who I sort of met here. In 1991, I came in here with my pal Meg Bazooka to try to get Louisa to sell my magazine that I had at the time, which she said yes to, and she did, and she sold it here. And over in the corner was this little tin box. My friend Meg was like, "What is that?" And Louisa said, "Open it up," and it was her magazine of poems. It was in a tin box. So we got to find out what is this one. It's cool, and we've been doing this stuff in parallel since at least then. Thanks to Grolier for hosting me. Thanks for Elizabeth and Ifeanyi. Especially thanks to Ifeanyi, because I had this moment where I had the balls to send him a very early draft that I would never have showed to that many other people. And the guy read the whole thing and took me out to lunch and helped me shape it to make it a lot better. So anything that you like about this book, it's his. Give him the credit. Anything you don't like, it's still my fault. And I have to thank my wife who's here. It's hard to be married to a poet. The first poem. Also, a lot of this I did in the archives of the Library of Congress and Boston Athenaeum and Massachusetts Historical Society. And my publisher, I should say, this is published by Mad Hat Press out of North Carolina. And when he read it, he had the great idea. Thank you, Mark. He's out in Western Mass, too far away. Thank you for publishing this book. But he said, "Gosh, do you think you could get permission to juxtapose the work with a lot of prints and engravings from the period?" So we delayed publication for 6 months. Tried to get all these permissions, and so inside the book it has these great engravings alongside a lot of them. And this engraving here is an engraving of a woman next to a power loom in Lowell, Massachusetts. So the first poem is called "Pirating the Power Loom." Francis Cabot Lowell to Nathan Appleton, 1813. I stole their designs with my own 2 eyes. I smuggled them to Boston in my mind. Exporting designs meant jail in Britain. Workers of looms weren't allowed to leave. So I snuck into Manchester myself. I made it back 2 days before the war. I saw iron cards and spinning jennies, I watched Luddites spin and weave all alone while looms marched in teams and didn't rest. I said to myself, this has to come home. My baggage was searched twice at Halifax. They didn't find drawings of their machines. I sketched it all out in my memory. I had their designs in my mind with me.
While I was here.
The beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the United States is a function of Francis Cabot Lowell, a Boston merchant who saw that we were about to go to war in 1812, and therefore there would be no supply of clothing or cotton in the United States. But all he needed was the power loom. So he went there and he said, show me this incredible stuff that you had. He had photographic memory, he memorized the designs, and we built power looms, the first one in Waltham by this guy Moody. If you go out to dinner in Moody Street in Waltham, it's named after Paul Moody, the engineer who Lowell shared with him his photographic memory. They created this thing. There wasn't enough water in the Charles, and they figured out that up in the Merrimack the waters are a lot faster. Avoid slavery. This poem's called Removal Act, 1830. Maize, beans, squash, the three sisters, rabbit, deer, fish, pots, baskets, clothes, trade you skins and fur, otter, lynx, fox, for knives, axes, muskets, gunpowder, and scarlet ribbon. We need the unused lands. Master the arts of civilization or go west of the Mississippi. Alabama, half of Georgia, western Tennessee, the Creeks, Cherokee, Chickasaws, a trail. Horses and oxen standing up in the mud, stiff and bones. One wagon for every 50, for children, for elders, for the rest of us, on foot, in tears. Bayonets at our backs, disease ahead. So Lowell becomes the industrial powerhouse of the United States, and Massachusetts becomes the cornerstone of the United States Industrial Revolution. And one of the things that Lowell saw when he went to the UK is that they had all these unions that struck all the time and would throw the Luddites that would mess up the machines. And so his ingenious idea was, I'm going to get women to work in these places. All these women are surplus labor in the farms in New England. And if you take 5 to 10 of them off the farm, it's still going to keep productivity the way it is. It might even actually improve productivity. So I'm going to take them and tell them, hey, you can come live in the city in Lowell. You can go out at night and drink. We're going to give you some money. You can meet some men. You can have some fun. And we'll tell their dads, hey, we're going to send money home. We're going to keep an eye on your daughter. And so it was a perfect symbiotic relationship. And these women work in a strike, and you didn't have to pay them anything like you needed to pay the men. And I discovered, Columbus style, this woman poet named Lucy Larkin, who was a worker in the Lowell Mills up there. And all the women there had their own literary magazine called the Lowell Offering. And she wrote a book of poems called The Idyll of Work that became semi-famous in the Boston area in the 1800s. It got her known well enough that she quit the mills, and she was sort of a secretary and assistant to John Greenleaf Whittier when he in the magazine. Both my shoulders, then lashed a rope 3 times around my chest. I was dragged through Wilson's Lane to State Street, to the spot of the Boston Massacre. They tore off my clothes, they kicked my face. The light of day did not cause them to care, so the mayor jailed me just to keep me safe. Another day devoted to thy cause, not till war is over will I pause. Well, all this changes. There's this big compromise in 1850 where there's new territories, Kansas and Nebraska, and there's a big conflict between the North and the South. This is all history you learn in your books, but and the deal is Kansas and Nebraska, those folks can decide if they're going to be pro-slavery or if they're going to be free. And in exchange for that, you weirdos up in Boston and in the North, if you want to have slaves, if you want to be free, go ahead and be free. You don't have to have slaves, but you're going to have to pass this thing called the Fugitive Slave Act, which says if my slave from Virginia goes to Boston and we get him, we get to take him home. And that was the compromise. It was called the Compromise of 1850. And the Lowell and Lawrence families were putting their cash right behind that to keep that all set, to keep that cotton flowing up to Boston and keep it all quiet. So even though we're really well known for being a bastion of abolitionism and social justice, the major interest groups here were not in line with that and were a key wall behind any real progress until Anthony Burns, a slave from Alexandria, and I was in Alexandria where I wrote a big part of this book where we lived a couple of years ago. Anthony Burns was a slave from Alexandria who escaped to Boston, who was, they caught him and found him under the Fugitive Slave Act and locked him and sent him back home to slavery. Anthony Burns, Boston, May 24th, 1854. I didn't want to make myself known. I didn't tell who I was. I got employed, I came to work, I worked hard, I kept my own counsel, I strove for myself. I didn't say I'd been a slave. I was going home one night, I heard someone behind me, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I heard cannons, I think from the Common. I hear because the Nebraska bill just passed. Stop, stop, you're the fellow that broke into the silversmith shop. I said he was mistaken. So the last poem is called The Last Full Measure of Devotion. My sword got stuck between his ribs. I kicked my foot into his chest. I pulled it out with both hands. In the same motion, I swung right into the gut of another. He hit the ground. I grabbed his colt. I shot one who was charging me with a rifle and bayonet soaked with blood and blue cloth. Without support of any kind, Captain said, retire by prolong, so McGlivery could fill the gap. We went quiet when he said, hold position at all hazards. I thrust my sword even harder into a Mississippi thigh as he tried to kick it from my hand, then go after our best gunner. I used rammer heads. I used hand spikes. I kicked him in the groin. I kneed him in the face. Then I shot him in the stomach. There was so much smoke around me, I didn't know their numbers. Too many Barksdale sharpshooters. Too many South Carolinas. Too many 21st Mississippis. Too many rocks for our wooden wheels. Too many dying men and horses to move our Napoleons back. We saw Bigelow get shot twice, but the bugler took him to the rear. We kept on trying to fight. I got stabbed twice in the ankle. I felt the shell go into my side, but my eyes were wide open when I died. Thank you.
I get asked many times, why do you write about atrocities and genocide? It's so dark. How can you write about this? And my answer is strictly is I have to. I have to be a voice for those that don't have a voice. And that's the reason for this book and some of my other books. And I'm going to start out, I forgot to mark my pages, but I have a list. I read in the Hastings reading series a little while ago, and I read with a writer named Brother Nicholas. And after the reading, we started to talk, and Hui and Tim were with me, and he told me I was a light in a dark world. So I thought, poem material. So that's how this first poem was born. In a dark world for him. You told me I was a light in a dark world. Hanging on to these words, I continued. Every day there is slaughter, murder, horrific things done to a body, things that make me sick. Day after day, death happens, despite the sun coming out to show the blue of the sky, beauty and ugliness in battle, light and dark in battle, each day a tug of war, and each day, each side wins somewhere in the world. You told me I was a light in a dark world. Why did you do this? Do you know something I don't? Am I an angel alone weeping with words coming out of my mouth that no one listens to? Nothing. Standing in line, I think nothing of it. deciding what to devour for lunch. A decision finally reveals itself to me. Like a stargazer, I stare at the menu against the wall. How lucky I am when others are not. Their shadows speak, making it difficult for me to eat. These murmurings, forces, cry in my head. I answer back every day. Collapsing quietly, sadly, it is politics why you starve. It is the big men with a circle of violence around them splattering the people, murder on the world's hands. Picking up the food with my hands, poems I call my Maria poems, and she's like a saint to me, and she kind of represents that in many of my poems, because back in 1980, I worked with a little girl who was 9 years old who fled from El Salvador, and she basically climbed into a pit on top of her mother's body and faked dead so that she wouldn't get shot. And so even though this poem isn't about that, you'll see that I use her name, again, like I said, as almost a saint figure. Maria's uncle. Maria had his guts in her hands, tried to push them back into his body, thinking it would save him. She couldn't. Screaming into her palms, his intestines touched her lips. She cried such sorrow, the abyss shook. Now Maria travels the world speaking about the dead, telling the world it is hopeless, that no one is capable of a quiet tongue. With outstretched hands, she handed everyone a flower, said, "You must water it to live, but if not, the depths of hell will assign you a seat." The poem came out of that. Tree. I cannot look at trees anymore. All I see is a finger, a lung, hearts, and intestines hanging from the branches. The soldiers tried to scare me into mercy. There are no leaves to notice. Even though I survived, my sight sees my village, friends, family hanging. On one finger was a ring, my husband's. I knew he was gone. I stumble now in this life, petrified of trees. Once they gave me shade, fruit, but now only sorrow, grief. I can't walk past them now, without thinking of rain, without thinking of black, without thinking of an endless abyss. Listen. The soldiers fire into the people, grabbing women and young girls, shoving bottles where no bottles should be. The soldiers beat them until lips are cracked, rape them again. There is no boundary not broken. The stories travel from country to country. The world says there is no proof. So many died without a burial or casket. So many died in pits unaccounted for. Can't you hear their weeping around 2 a.m.? How can you sleep? How can you when the world holds such a stench, holds so many bones? Seem to hold on to the earth. The wreckage looks like a nest for some wild beast. Only those left, the witnesses, the living, feel the pain, cry, covering hearts with hands, bow heads. Their sounds are loud. Many spirits descend on this sun-streaked day that turned cloudy. Hope was abandoned in the bloody Honda atrocities. And this poem came out of it. And the very last stanza is pretty much a quote from the book Worse Than War by Daniel Jonah Goldenhagen. Rwanda interview. How do I shake hands with the mass murderers to get an interview? Knowing that those hands swung a machete, slaughter in motion, the Hutu annihilating the Tutsi, a well-planned elimination. So many times this happens, I stand silent, overwhelmed, frustrated, falling, and there is no stopping it. While my body betrays me with a heavy anchor, the angel waits, plays a harmonica, weird. I thought I would hear a harpsichord or a trumpet. As my time comes closer to the end with my head in a book, I dream to start over again. The sky, gray and commanding, wants me to look at it. Then it changes to blue, then green, a force of nature with a sense of humor. Floating towards the clouds, I'll take your hand, dear angel. With one touch, the mystery will not be important. Transformed, right then, I will remember everything. And before I close, I just want to say what an honor it is to read with Kevin. And thank you so much.
Thanks. Massachusetts. We're proud to call home, but it's also a lot of stuff. But the conscience of somebody kind of got agitated one day, then the game changed. And we don't have a whole lot of rifles or bazookas or tanks to fight this battle, but to the extent that we continue to bear witness and make somebody uncomfortable, and the poets are doing their job. So thank you both, and maybe you all have some questions or observations or questions for both Kevin and Gloria.
I wanted to say, ask Kevin something. Obviously, you've done a lot of research, and it's really good research. And I'm interested in what you think using poetry, this material, can offer, as opposed to just writing historical.
You know, my rent-paying job is all about rationality and causality, and as an artist and a poet, I don't know the answer to your question. It's just the way that I went into it, and I felt like I started to write this book while I was working in Washington, commuting in from Virginia, driving by the slave quarter place where the slaves were being auctioned, and some of them were escaping to Boston, while at the same time all the secretaries in the office I was working with were 2-3 hours late for work every day from Baltimore because of the riots in Baltimore at the same time. I just can't write that. Rage Against the Machine, take it on at its head, and Charles Olson, Muriel Ruckgeiser, William Carlos Williams, Seamus Haney are folks that I guess taught me subliminally that some way to deal with the present is to engage with the past. And I discovered everything I knew, everything in this book. I'm sure I got some stuff wrong. I'm sure there's a lot more to the story, but to me, what I grasped onto the fact, what I grasped onto and discovered was, I mean, first of all, I was like shocked. You know, I just never put the thing together. I lived here in Massachusetts, and I've gone up to the National Park Service and gone on tours of all those looms. Oh, this is cool, and I'm an economist by training. Wow, cool production process, technological change, woo! And then I'm like, wow, you put this whole thing together and see what we fueled at the time. But then what gave me hope during all this shit that's going on is the fact that, that these guys changed their mind.
Yeah, I was going to say to Gloria, you know, I felt like you gave pieces of newsreel or history an emotional voice. Because my son is from El Salvador. I actually went down there to get him at a very intense time. And I followed, you know, what was going on there quite a bit. But you bring it to life because it's actually the felt people that you know, talk about in your poetry. I felt it was very strong for me. It was very beautiful, very, I mean, it was tragic, but I could really feel, you know, some of those things that I knew as facts, but you know, it was like they came alive again. It was really very powerful for me.
Thank you. Like this, you can see me. It was very emotional for me working with many refugees. It was funny because then all of a sudden, you know, people started contacting you. Somebody would say, "Hey, I know so and so. They have something to tell you," and you know, and it's like, God, how do I sleep at night? But it makes me feel better to do something about it so that I can sleep at night because it's so horrible.
So these guys had a lot of money. So they were kind of doing this thing that maybe was against their own rational interests. And yet, it must have come a point where they felt regarded, but their life was not quite fulfilled. So that by doing this, they kind of rose to another level of fulfillment for their lives to answer to their conscience. Because once the conscience was uncomfortable with this, you can't really enjoy your wealth very much. You know, they have a saying in Igbo land, you know, Onye Jonye Nani Jumwe, that is he who has another man pinned to the ground is also pinning himself to the ground. You can't get up to go get a drink of water. Because you want that person down there, you got to stay with him. So there's some kind of thing that this stuff does to us. And partly through, Gloria, your own poems, these abuses, you know, you can't rest the moral model imagination rises up, and there's a zone of discomfort that affects all of us. You know, so we have each other's battles to fight in a way, whether we like it or not. You know, and I see that as an inspirational source for the poet who grapples with this. They have these figures are motivated by that. All those soldiers that did all that killing, you know, whatever happened to them?
You know, they didn't stop exploiting their workers. And 12 strikers. There's a whole other story there. So there's some, yeah. So there's some, some level of conscience. There's another level that just sort of didn't penetrate the consciousness.
Well, that's what I really appreciated for Annie. Was a quote because she said, it's a valuable collection. It puts the focus of the white male where its distortion of vision begins and is occasionally resolved. But you know, for those of us white guys, we got to wake up and go to work every day.
It's almost as if you need that distortion of vision in order to carry through with stuff. Sometimes it's really not a tragedy of dream, but a tragedy of perception. When you see the world and then you act the same way, and sometimes in order to accommodate yourself, then the perception gets so messed up so you can get this thing done. But there's only so much you can continue to sustain this level of distortion. At some point,
Put them in their pocket and take them to work. And then reprint, science or Shakespeare, political tracts, the Communist Manifesto, this sort for workers to be self-educated. The factory was printed there, and the monopolies distributed them on the rails.
In my book, I focus all on Lawrence, but if you go up to the mills, you'll see that there was the Lawrence, the city of Lawrence, the city of Lowell, but in all of them, there's always a couple of the big buildings, which are the Appleton Mills, right? And Nathan Appleton, a couple of these poems are letters from those two, and Appleton, Wisconsin, was also so the Appleton financed people from Massachusetts to go there and just try it out.
In Cambridge and was preaching to people who had been enslaved and murdered their master in Charlestown. And Edward Brooks, who was a student at Harvard, writes about, Nathaniel Appleton preaching to the prisoners at Sunday, and the prisoners are in the church, which was like big theater too. But so, it's like goes backwards and forwards, this hooking up and that. And your book's very nice because it's only recently that this part of the country started dealing with its slavery roots, and they haven't touched the whole thing around, the looms and that complicity, with the South. So.
And one of the things that I found out about my second favorite reading of this book, my first one is here, because this is the all poetry bookshop in the world, and I used to crawl in here when I was a kid and be like, wow. Is that I'm going to read at the national, so a couple of the mills up there are national parks now, and they have something called the William Moses Lecture, and I'm going to read in the mills. Just totally excited to be right there in that. But as I was reading about that museum, so that happened in the 90s, I think, is when it became a national park, and they refurbished the mills. And there was a huge protest from the antecedents of the Black Lives Matter movement because it didn't touch any of that stuff. Yeah, if you went on a tour in 1992 here in liberal Massachusetts and went to look at the looms, they'd say, "Oh, wow, we gave all these opportunities to women, and we had this incredible technological innovation." And they're still. If you go there now, I took my son there on a year and a half ago, and you watch the video. It's better than that, but it was actually it was a function of people protesting and articles all over the newspaper when it first came out. And there's a small little exhibits that connected to it, but one of the things that they don't admit now is the piracy of it. Is that it's literally.
A question for Gloria. Yeah, like you were saying, you're so drawn to atrocity and whatnot. When I was reading your poem, I really don't get a sense that you were like sermonizing. I get a sense, like Lee was sharing, that it was very powerful, and it's always a balance between events or history as well as the craft of poetry. In it, I hear music and I hear imagery. And then I wonder how you really struggle with the material, because here you have some event or history that you want to wrestle with. But at the same time, you have to write the poem. So how does that work for you, in terms of song, image, and
It's a struggle for me to write about those things. It's like the stories that I hear, they don't know sometimes that they're giving me those images, because a lot of the things that I wrote are actual, some words, rephrased or changed. The thing I struggle with maybe a little is I want to do it justice. I just want people to feel the emotion that I feel, so that you will, maybe join me and speak up about it instead of not doing anything, or in your own way if you don't speak up about it, maybe getting involved in organizations, that help these people. Because when you think about it, how many countries, oh my God, that there are killings in, I mean, it's just, I can't even grasp it. And, and sometimes, when I'm writing, I don't have trouble falling asleep over it. I try to separate myself. I think if I didn't, I would be in the nut house, because especially the things that they say to me. So the images really come, from their words, from research. That's how I pretty much get them. And then the words just kind of flow for me. They can't help but not to, because I'm so wrapped up in what they're telling me.
And also the use of the voice, like you were talking about Maria, kind of like using that as a way to, to write a poem. And I find that, just to have to keep that kind of balance, between what happened and actually the craft, the music, the line, and
I'm sure Maria was interesting. I had to have a translator, and I don't know how much was lost in translating. Hopefully not too much, but the gist of it is what I shared with you earlier. And all of a sudden I just found she's cropping up in all my poems. So that's why I look at her as a saint figure almost. I even put her as coming, in general, those that come over to this country. That don't know the language, don't know the culture. So I put her adjusting, to that even in some of my poems that aren't in the book, but it's in the next one. And, so it's nice to have a figure kind of to carry through, She's like a real, hero's the wrong word, but wow, to lay on top of your mother, and, all the dead bodies, yeah, I just, so I hope that answered you.
Yeah.
No, before you sit down,
Okay.
the the connection between your long editorial stuff and your creative side, do you want to say a word or two about it? Because, you know, the Savannah Barbara takes a lot of time to get all that stuff, and before that, so that portion of your service to the literary world and then your own creative work. And also, following on that question, I was thinking about that picture during the Vietnam War of the girl with napalm.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
a very
yeah.
iconic picture, you know. And you get over that, I think some of this powerful stuff, yeah.
Yeah, there was a picture in the New York Times of 3 little boys, and they were all bloody. And when I saw that, you know, oh my God, so a poem came out of that. That was in Pakistan after a bombing, too. So I thought, I looked at it, and it just pulled here, and so then the words.
Oh, the Syrian boy,
The
5-year-old Syrian boy, yeah.
Yeah, that too, yeah. And then you ask, you know, maybe how I do all that. I'm an insomniac. So it helps a lot because I work as a social worker by day. And so at night, you know, Bill goes to bed at 9 o'clock, is snoring away. And it's heaven. So, you know, I come alive at midnight and I do some writing. And I go to bed at 2 and get up at 5 every day.
Wow.
You know, and I function. I don't feel anybody. So, you know, just Friday night usually is my night to chill, but you know, because I feel cranky, but I don't feel cranky tonight. Yes.
I just want to say, I'm glad that you started the reading with somebody talking about the light and how you're like the light in the world, because you have to shine a light on these things. You have to, and I understand, and it's so painful, but it is a light. So you know, thank you for you know. And the thing that strikes me about your poetry is in the tradition of Carolyn Forche, it's really poetry. You know, I really get a sense of, when I listen to you, of you know what poetry is. Your works are just, I have to call them very poetic, which makes it very beautiful, even though you're talking about things that it's almost impossible to hear.
Yeah.
You know, but we compartmentalize things, I think. If you look at this country alone, you're going to find police gunning down innocent children in the street. I mean, so it's not just, this is a worldwide phenomenon. And we're not separate from that. I mean, we maybe don't have soldiers gunning us down and throwing us in ditches, but we do have very many atrocities here. We have gays and lesbians and transgender people being beaten to death. You know, it's here too.
Sure.
And it's unfortunately where humanity is now. We hope it can change. You have
And I
to
wonder if it's always been there, but we're just hearing about it more because of the internet, TV, and that. And then I would like to think, gee, hopefully it wasn't always like this with all this crap going on, you know, but
it was. I mean,
I
it was
think it
slavery.
was.
It started
It's
on
just-
slavery.
yeah.
It started on the genocide of the Native Americans.
yeah, it's never ending.
Yeah.
It's just never
But
ending.
thank you for shining the light
Yeah,
and for
thank you
coming
so
here
much.
tonight.
Thank you.
If there's any more question, if not, then we could you know, try to bring this again. Thank you both. You know, but remember one time. Reading and things went very well. I think it was Gardner and a moral fiction book that the fundamental sense of the artist as he or she looks at life is one of glory obstructed, a glimpsed wholeness shattered. This thing have a sense we're weighing you down, but we better keep our eyes on the prize of glory obstructed, a glimpsed wholeness shattered. That's what motivates us, because we know that despite all these disturbances and fracturing, there's something. That's our hope. Thank you both.
Thank you.